Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Well, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We are so excited to have Jimmie Bratcher here with us today. Jimmie, thank you for joining us on Spirituality Adventures.
Thanks for having me.
I was trying to think back when we first met. It's been a long while ago, and a lot of common friends along the way.
Right.
It's over a decade ago for
I
sure.
would think so, yeah.
Maybe even 20 years ago. I'm not sure.
It could have been, but we really didn't have any kind of one-on-one interface. We did lunch probably 5 years ago or more.
All right. Yeah.
And that was the first time that we actually sat down and had a conversation.
Okay. All right. Well, good to have you here. When we had that conversation 5 years ago, I think you brought up this story with Jessica, your daughter,
right?
Which I want to get to
in a minute.
In a little later.
Okay.
But I kind of want to give that as a teaser to people to hang on, because the story that Jimmie has to tell about his daughter Jessica is truly inspiring. I was reading it this morning and I cried several times.
Yeah.
It just really touched me. So let's start with, where did you grow up? And
okay.
I think you're a Kansas City kid, aren't you?
I grew up in Liberty. Actually.
Yeah.
Clay County, Missouri. And, that's where I did a lot of my rebellious activities. So I grew up in a household with two older sisters, and my mother had subscribed to the pop culture of the day of how to raise kids, which was don't discipline them. So I grew up completely undisciplined and really spent my teenage years completely out of control, using and abusing every substance I could find, and ended up just really crying out for somebody to just say no. And nobody ever said no. So I ended up, LSD was my drug of choice, and did that. I met my wife, Sherry, at a Black Sabbath concert at Memorial Hall in Kansas City, Kansas. It was her first American tour.
Wow.
And I tell people that...
Is that 70?
I think it was 71 or something, 72.
Yeah.
And I tell people that we were both tripping, and I couldn't tell if she was that beautiful or if I was hallucinating. And but shortly after that, she got pregnant, and 6 months into her pregnancy, we got married. And we call that time in our lives the marriage made in hell, because that's all there was around our house. We were very, of course, with my background, I was very selfish, and we were both very immature. And then add in substance on top of that, it created a big mess. And 3 years into the marriage, we got in a fight one night that I lost. And 3 days later, after having reconstructive surgery on my face, my grandmother came to visit me, and I'm all black and blue and bruised because I had to have my nose reconstructed. And she walks in and looks at me and says, "Baby, I will give you the money if you just get a divorce." And so, your marriage is really messed up if Granny will pay for the divorce.
That's crazy.
And so we got a divorce, went through the whole process, and child support, the whole deal. And about 9 months after the divorce was final, we started seeing each other again. And of course, we couldn't tell my grandmother because she'd wanted a refund, but we decided in our insanity to get a marriage license. And so we got a marriage license, and Sherry had been attending a church in outside of Hamilton, Missouri, Caldwell County.
Do you see this bug?
Yeah,
flying through here. We got to stop.
He's not.
Mark the edit mark.
He's not doing anything
We've
bad.
never had a bug down here.
You want me to smash him?
Yeah, please. That'll drive me crazy. Perfect. He's dead now.
And I'm like,
mark that edit point there.
I'm like
Matt.
Completely germified, but we good to go?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. But
that would just drive me nuts seeing that. We've never had a bug down here.
So 9 months after the divorce was final, we got a marriage license. And Sherry had started loosely attending a little church outside of Hamilton, Missouri. And Hamilton, Missouri is in Caldwell County, which is the smallest populated county in the state of Missouri. So there's only 5,000 people in the county. And the name of the church, you can't make this stuff up, was God's Sheep Shed, where all the big sheep and the little lambs get fed. That was their marketing tagline. And we stumbled in there on a Sunday night unannounced with a marriage license. And I went up to the pastor and said, we want to get married tonight. And at first he looked at me and he said, well, she's trying to serve the Lord and you're an alcoholic drug addict and I won't join that mess together. That was a quote.
Wow.
And so, I'm like, okay.
Did he know you?
Well, I had met him once.
Or did he just discern this?
Well, no, I had met him once. And so we went and sat down and waited for church to start. And right before church started, he came up and he said, I'll tell you what. He says, I will marry you tonight, but you're going to believe on Jesus. And he said, are you ready for that? And my faith response was, hey, man, I'm here. And I guess God interpreted that as yes. So after church, they had a little makeshift wedding ceremony. And, we got down on our knees and I invited Jesus to come into my life and believed by faith in him, and got up from there a different individual, a completely different individual. All of my desires for the destructive behavior that I had were gone. And so we started our relationship. That was, our second wedding ceremony was December 19th, 1976. So almost 45 years ago. Wow. And so we've been going since then.
Wow.
10 months
amazing.
Later, our daughter Amanda was born. And
just Jason, your first son, yeah. Amanda.
Right.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. And
very cool.
So we stayed there for 16 years. We moved out there, and I had an office in downtown Kansas City, so I was driving back and forth, and then we left there in 1993 and started basing our ministry out of St. Joseph, Missouri, out of a church there, and we're there on staff for almost 6 years, and then resigned in March of 2000, and we started what we currently do, which is we call preaching the gospel and playing the blues. So
it's great. So talk about your musical background and how, when did you start playing, and how did you get into the music scene?
My dad played guitar. He was kind of a bluegrass country kind of guy. And one weekend when I was about 12, he borrowed an electric guitar and amplifier from a guy at work and brought it home. It was summertime. I'm 12 years old. It's the weekend, and I didn't leave the house. And so he thought, well, there's maybe something here. We didn't have any money, but we had an extra car, a 1958 DeSoto two-door Hemi, which is worth a bunch of money right now. And he ran an ad in the Kansas City paper that said, we'll trade 1958 DeSoto for electric guitar and amplifier. And we got one call, and we went and picked it up. And I still have that guitar and amplifier to this day. It's been through many transitions, but that got me started. And of course, that was the music was fuel to my behavioral issues. And then when I came to faith, one of the first things my pastor told me was, you got to quit playing that devil music. And so for 20 years, I played Southern gospel and choruses and kind of folky kind of thing, but I didn't really do what I do.
Okay.
And of course, he was wrong. You know, there's only two types of music, good and bad. and so, I felt like, you know, for me, I felt like it was more important for me to follow Jesus than it was to play music. It was more important for me to raise my kids and to be present than to, you know, pursue my aspirations of, you know, being a full-time musician.
Yeah.
So I laid that aside. And
what kind of music were you playing before?
I was playing kind of a blues or Southern rock kind of thing.
Like before you came to Jesus,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Like who were your favorites?
You know, I was playing, you know, I was always a Hendrix fan, but I had this country thing also. So I was playing electric guitar and pedal steel. And so, you know, we'd do stuff like some Marshall Tucker or some Charlie Daniels or stuff like that that kind of integrated into that kind of environment.
Okay. Oh,
So,
yeah.
never successful because my substance abuse always blew all that up.
Yeah.
You know, it was more important. The party was more important than the performance.
Yeah.
So
when did you think about doing blues and the gospel stuff? Like, where did that?
well, in the late 90s, when we went to St. Joe, to the church that we were on staff for there, they didn't have need of my music because they already had very capable music people. So I was involved in pastoral care, and I was the entrepreneur in that church. So anytime we were pioneering something, so, you know, if we're going to do media ministry, we're going to do small groups, we're going to do, you know, personal ministry, counseling, I would go to that area, develop it, raise it up, hire staff, and then pass it off. And so when we left there and started traveling, and it was mainly I was traveling and preaching, but I discovered that I had an opportunity to record my first album in 2001. And so I started.
Which album was that?
Honey and Rock.
Okay. Because I went on iTunes.
Yeah.
And I don't think that album's on iTunes.
Well,
because I found like the Red album was like 2005.
Yeah.
There was one that you.
There was two before that. There was
Okay.
actually three before that.
Okay.
And I made the mistake of, I have some albums that are as the Rev Jimmie Bratcher and some that are as Jimmie Bratcher.
Ah.
So you have to.
So there's two artists on there.
Yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately. And there's no way to combine them. So
Okay.
I'm stuck with this.
Two identities.
Right.
Yeah.
Two identities online.
Yeah. Okay.
So I started writing, and that just kind of normally came out of my heart. And the producer I was working with at the time had that background. And so that was kind of the encouragement. But it was all of that was just a process of a journey, you know, so it was bit by bit. So I met this producer, he invited me to his studio. I started writing. The blues stuff just kind of.
Was this a producer in town here?
No, it was a guy named Larry Howard, and Larry was a Southern rock guy in Macon, Georgia. Was, you know, in a band called Grinder Switch, which they were like the pseudo opening act for the Allman Brothers.
Oh,
And
sweet.
so, you know, so anyway, I went there, and that just started coming out of me, and I was doing it totally for my own pleasure. I didn't have any kind of higher intent or purpose or vision for it at that time. And then I had always been involved in some form of prison ministry. And so I had an opportunity to join an organization called Operation Starting Line, which was a consortium of ministries that was managed by Chuck Colson at Prison Fellowship. But Billy Graham was involved, and Promise Keepers and Navigators, American Bible, a whole bunch of these people pulled their resources together, and I needed backing tracks to be able to do that. So I went and recorded 6 songs, and those became the backing tracks that I used for the performances that we did in prison. And that just kind of started developing. And then in 2002, I did my second album, 2003, called Something Better. And I had local guys here playing with me by that time. And one of the guys was a bass player named Jeff Wallenberg. And Jeff was laying in bed, 44 years old, reading his Bible, found a passage of scripture that spoke to him from the Psalms 130, where it says, "If you should count iniquities, O God, who could stand? But there's forgiveness with you, that you might be reverenced." And he grabbed a highlighter, highlighted it, had a massive heart attack, and died.
Oh, wow.
And so at his funeral, which he had, him and his wife had 5 kids combined, and didn't have any kind of plans at 44 for funerals. Some of the local musicians got together and to do a benefit for him. They invited me to come and play. And at that time, I was still very pastoral, and I had actually preached at our home church at that time. And so I was suit and tie, short, short hair, very professional.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never seen you with short hair.
Yeah. I was very, very Jimmy Swaggartish. And so, but they did this benefit on Sunday afternoon at the Blue Moon Lounge in Blue Springs, Missouri. And I left from preaching, full preaching regalia, grabbed my stuff and drove there and walked in, and they wanted me to come up and play. And so I said, great, I'll sit in with you guys. And they're like, no, we want to do one of the songs that Jeff did with you. And so I have a song that I've written called Love Running After Me, which is a prodigal song. Mm-hmm. All my life I've been running from things I couldn't see, when all the time I didn't know it was love running after me.
Oh, good.
And it's a slow blues song. And at the end of it, I'm screaming, Jesus, Jesus, will you take me just as I am? And I had no idea what the reception would be in a smoke-filled bar at 2:00 in the afternoon. And one of the other guitar players came up to me afterwards and just threw his arms over my shoulder and drew me in and whispered in my ear and said, Rev, you can save me. Mm. And I knew what he meant,
right.
And so we invited him over, and the next day, him and his girlfriend, and they both made a profession of their faith in Jesus through that experience. But that opened my eyes to see, hey, wait a minute, maybe I can do this outside of the church. And
I love that.
And then the next kind of step in the journey was, I was on a motorcycle trip with a friend of mine, and he had this idea. You would think it had been my idea, it was his idea. He goes, I want to go to Mississippi and visit all the historic blues sites, because there's only about 3 counties in Mississippi where all this music originated, Coahoma County being the center, and Clarksdale. And so we got to Memphis and spent the night, and then got on our bikes and started south, and we pulled into Clarksdale and didn't really have a plan. And so we stop at this stoplight, and we're talking, red light, and he goes, well, I got this book in my saddlebag. Let's pull over here and stop. And to my left, I look over, and here's a monument that marks this intersection as called the Crossroads, which, if you've seen the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, they talk about Tommy Johnson and selling his soul to the devil, and then Robert Johnson doing the same thing. And so we're sitting there at the crossroads, and this old gnarly guy in this pickup truck pulls up with rebel flag in the back window, gun rack, full beard, ponytail. And he pulls up to me, and he looks out, and he snarls at me and goes, are you boys here to look at my town? And we're like, yeah. And so we're talking, and my friend goes, where can we get barbecue? And he goes, well, right there at Abe's at the Crossroads, which is a whole nother story of that place. So, but it's worth investigating, looking up Abe's barbecue at Clarksdale.
All right.
And so he takes us over there, and we start talking, and he goes, so what do you boys do? I said, well, this guy's a pastor, but I'm a, blues guitar player. And he goes, and an evangelist. And he goes, well, there's people around here into the blues. He goes, do you know Morgan Freeman? And I, well, no, but I know who he is. And he goes, well, he's got a place downtown. He goes, come on, let's go downtown. I'll introduce you to him. And so we go down, and Morgan has a place there in Clarksdale.
Like the actor Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He has a place in Clarksdale called Ground Zero Blues Club.
I'll be darned.
And so we go in, and he's not there, but we meet his business partners, attorney, the club manager, and all these things. And so this guy that we met at the Crossroads, Doc, he's like the unofficial mayor or something at Clarksdale. So he takes us to all these places. So we leave, and I get home. I send him a card, thanking him for it. And about 3 months later, I get an email from him that says, I need your phone number. And so he calls me up, and he says, well, I've been appointed the chairman of the first ever blues festival to be held at the Crossroads, and I want you to be the first band that we book.
Wow.
And so the Clarksdale Press Register does a big article on me. They conclude the article by saying, quote, if the Reverend Jimmie Bratcher would have been at the Crossroads, Robert Johnson probably wouldn't have sold his soul to the devil.
What an honor, though.
But we're getting ready to play the festival, and I called Doc, and I saw that some other people were playing at Morgan Freeman's. And so I said, well, we want to do this, but, the only time we can do it is like Saturday afternoon. And he says, well, they're not open, but let me ask Morgan. So he comes back to me and says, well, Morgan says, if you want to play, we'll open the club up Saturday afternoon at 2:00. And so we go there. And I know this is a long story, but you can edit it out if you want to. But we go there, and I'm expecting 2 people. It's completely full, bikers drinking like there's no tomorrow. And it's the first time I've ever done like a full set in a non-church venue. And so I get to the same prodigal song. I'm getting ready to scream, Jesus, Jesus, will you take me as I am? I have no idea what's going to happen. And I get to that part and just start screaming it out. And all of a sudden I hear chairs moving. And everybody in the place stands up and gives a standing ovation because I screamed the name of Jesus in this club.
Wow.
And it was a real discovery for me to be able to see that people actually wanted to hear the gospel. People actually wanted to experience something like that. And so that started us then on a journey that's now been going on for 21 years.
Interesting. That's wonderful. Beautiful story. I like that. Well, cool. Well, couple of things. The Red album, you had a song on there called Bad Religion, and I enjoyed that one. Where did that come from?
Well, it came out of my own experience.
I was betting it did.
Because I was for years a very harsh, very judgmental, and a very mean preacher.
Oh, wow.
And so I wanted to write about that experience in a way that would identify that as a problem and offer a solution. And so I called my good friend, Dr. Jim Richards, who's an expert on bad religion, and got him to help me, finish that song. So
yeah, gosh, there's so much of that.
There is.
Out there.
There is. Yeah, there's the misrepresentation of the character and nature of God by his followers is something that it's just really sad.
Yeah.
I have a friend one time came to me, and he was about half spiritual. So, sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. But he came to me one time and he said, real deep Southern drawl. He goes, well, I love Jesus and I love Elvis, but I just can't stand their fans. And so
that's great.
But that's where that song came from, was out of that, and kind of my disdain for some TV preachers and different things that
Yeah.
I've seen where people are very harsh because, what really draws us to the Lord is his love for us.
Right.
And he is, one of the most radical things that Jesus ever did was to present God as Father. Mm-hmm. And that hadn't happened up to that point, and he was considered to be blasphemous for that. But it really describes for us the nature of God and how how he wants this relationship with us as a father. Mm-hmm. And when I start to relate to that from my own experience, which is limited with my children, then it makes it clear that I can see that my harshness, my anger, my bad religion didn't do anything but drive people away instead of draw people close.
Right. Wow. That's a good lead in, but to Jessica's story. But I got to talk about this really quick with you. Your newest album, I'm Hungry.
Right.
And you gave this to me on CD, and I don't even have a CD player that works anymore.
It's a business card. You look it up on Spotify.
But no, I was because I like seeing who's playing and where you recorded. Is Covenant Studio? Is that Mr. Waggy's place?
It is.
Okay,
yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So I get to listening to this thing, and it's all about food.
Right.
And I'm starting to think like you're using food as a metaphor for, it seems like a lot of different things. In my mind, I'm thinking, wow, this is a metaphor for sex. This is a metaphor for spirituality. This is a metaphor for, you name it. And tell us, are you a foodie? What got you into this thing?
I love cooking.
I'm hungry, folks. You got to check this out.
I love cooking. And through the years, I have written a few songs about food. And so it started with a song called Green Bananas, there's a remix of that on the album. And then I wrote I recorded a song also on that same album called Grits Ain't Groceries, which is an old blues standard that was written by Titus Turner and made famous by a guy named Little Milton. And then on my Secretly Famous album, I wrote a song called Bologna Sandwich Man. And it's really kind of a protest song to everybody that's eating healthy. How snobby people get when they eat healthy, and really what they really actually want is a bologna sandwich, But and I threatened because of that. I kept saying to people, it's like, I'm going to do a whole album of songs about food. And then somebody came to me, I think it was one of my kids, came to me and said, as much as you cook, we should just write a cookbook. And so we started asking our friends and family to participate.
Right.
And so my son Jason is a chef. And another chef in there, local chef Yoshi Kipper, who's the head chef at Liberty Hospital, contributed. But there's keto, paleo, southwestern, southern, some Depression era recipes in there.
Interesting.
And Sherry's fried chicken. So it's a 196-page cookbook. So it's a serious piece of work. But
that's great. What's your website? Is JimmieBratcher.com. Yeah, GIMMIE.
Yeah.
BRATCH.
Actually, the easiest one is therevjb.com.
Therevjb.com.
Yeah, we released the album on April 23rd, and internationally, and to date, it's been 19 weeks in the top 50 contemporary blues albums in the world based on radio play. It spent 7 weeks in the top 10 and went all the way to number 3.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. Everybody says, awesome. Well, what does that mean? It's like, I don't know. Somebody said it's bragging rights. That's it, So
what's bacon a metaphor for?
A bacon.
Bacon.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. Just plain old, I know it's, some spiritual people might have issues with me singing about bacon, but
I'm thinking it's sex, like Song of Solomon, but bacon instead.
No, the sex song would be Baby, I Like What You're Cooking.
Baby, I Like What You're Cooking. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of lyric videos out there on YouTube from the album.
Okay.
And some other things. Yeah. But one of the songs is Where You Gonna Stop, which is my directory to 18 Kansas City barbecue restaurants. So all of which that I have eaten at.
Yeah.
But it's like, you listen to the song and then it gives you kind of a roadmap if you're going to visit Kansas City, where you can go get some good barbecue.
Right. Yeah. So what's your favorite barbecue? Everybody asks that. It's so hard. At least pick 3.
I can pick 3.
Yeah.
So I love LC's. You ever been there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love LC's.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. LC's is my favorite.
When I moved up to the Northland in 72, that was a hamburger place.
It still is.
Yeah.
Really good hamburger place.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like my number 2 hamburger place.
Yeah.
But yeah, LC's, which is over off of Old 50 Highway at Eastwood, near Eastwood Traffic Light.
Yeah.
And it has a little landing when you first walk in the door and a few stairs. And if they don't have a rug out on the floor, you have to hold yourself because it's so greasy. You're gonna slide. But I love LC's, and we always spring. Whenever we have guests come in from out of town or international, we always take them to Arthur Bryant's.
Yeah.
Because of the history.
You bet.
And all that stuff. And then I'd probably say my next one would maybe. I mean, we just ate there recently. Would be Jack Stack. On the plaza.
Okay. Yeah.
But also like Scott's Kitchen. Have you been up here?
No, I have not. I've heard of, I've had several. Actually, I did catering with him one time and it was excellent.
Yeah.
Up there near the airport. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Up off Ambassador.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're only open for lunch. But
yeah. I catered with him once. That was really good.
Yeah.
KC Joe's now instead of Oklahoma Joe's.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't go there until they changed the name.
Right. Well, I did, and I loved it. But I remember going to Jack Stack when it was, in Martin City.
Yeah, right.
And that was their only location. Yeah. And I used to go down there with my father-in-law, and he had built Jack Fiorella's home way back. And so my father-in-law was a Favazza. And so anyway, he'd built the Fiorella home there. Anyway, good stuff. Well, let's talk about your daughter, Jessica. What's the best way to introduce this story? Because a lot of the people that are going to be listening don't know anything about it.
Well,
so this is, by the way, this is for me, it's super powerful story and I love it. So you introduce us, help people get a hold of what's going on.
1971, I was, as I mentioned, a selfish, out of control 17-year-old. And I was dating a girl. Dating would be a kind of an overstatement. But and one night she came to me and told me that she was pregnant. And to which I didn't believe her. And so that was the end of the conversation. She didn't ever contact me after that. And I heard that she had a baby, and that was the end of that. And so in 76, Sherry and I remarried and came to faith in Jesus. And then in the mid 80s, I was in Liberty at my hometown in a restaurant, and I see this girl that I had dated's dad and these 2 little kids come in. And so that would have been made her about 13 or 14. And I see them across the restaurant. They don't know that I'm there. But I look at this little girl and I'm like, this is my daughter. And Sherry had asked when we were in our first marriage, she asked me one night, she said, now, you're not going to have some kids showing up or something. And I said, well, maybe.
Yeah.
That was my answer, was maybe. So I saw her that day and knew immediately that she was my daughter. And I called.
Just the way she looked.
Just her.
Yeah.
And so I called Sherry and told her, and we began to ask the Lord what we should do. And what we got was...
What year was this?
This would have been in the mid 80s.
Oh, 80s. Okay. Gosh.
And so we...
She's 13, yeah.
The answer that we received was nothing. And so we went with that. So fast forward to 2009, on Father's Day, I'm speaking in St. Louis at St. Louis Family Church, Jeff Perry's church, big church. I got the band there. I'm telling our story, and just a phenomenal thing. There's like 5,000 or 6,000 people in attendance, and there's this girl in the audience on Father's Day. We don't know her. She doesn't know us. But she's so impressed that she begins to communicate to her big sister. And when she gets out of church, she calls her on the phone, and she's telling her all about this incredible preacher, musician, the music, the story. And her big sister says, well, tell me this guy's name, and I'll look him up on Father's Day. And she tells her sister, his name's Jimmie Bratcher. She hears the phone drop. And her big sister picks it up and asks her little sister and says, well, do you know who this man is to me? And she says, no. And her big sister says, well, he's my dad. And she had asked her mother when she was 8 years old who her daddy was. And her mother told her that his name was Jimmie Bratcher, that he had long curly hair, and he played guitar. And so
those were the three things that she knew about her dad.
Yeah. And so her little
Jennifer is the sister.
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Little sister Jennifer.
Right.
Hears you speaking at a church in 2009 on Father's Day.
Right.
Calls her sister just to talk about you. Yeah. It's crazy.
So her little, Jennifer asked Jessica, she said, well, what are you going to do about this? And she goes, I'm not going to do anything about it. He wasn't ever here for me, so why should I even care anything about him? But for the next year and a half, unknown to anybody, Jennifer would go to their mother and ask her to contact me. So a year and a half later, on February 13th, 2011, I'm speaking in Christiana, Pennsylvania. I am preparing to speak for the 9th time that weekend. It's the last service. I'm in the green room drinking a cup of coffee, and I hear this voice in my heart. And the voice says, I'm about to change your life. And so I began to dream about what that change could be, and we're always like this big when God's got something much bigger in mind. And I do the last service. We get in the car to head to Philadelphia to fly home. And I get an email from Jessica's mother. The first time I've heard from her since 1971. And the email says, it's overdue that you should meet your daughter and your grandsons. Her name's Jessica, and she doesn't know about you yet. But obviously Jessica did. And her mother said, you can find her on Facebook. So I responded to her mother and said, when and where. And then went on Facebook and sent Jessica a friend's request. And when she got that request, she panicked because she didn't know what it meant or why I was all of a sudden there. And so she went into this, month-long panic of freaking out, just totally not knowing what to do or why. And I went into this really deep grief because it all of a sudden hit me, the weight of my actions, that I had abandoned one of my children and walked away from them. And I just could not believe that was possible, but I had done that. And, the Bible tells us sometimes there are things that happen to us that we don't have words for. And it says that our prayers are just groans. And through that time, all I could do was groan. And I'd wake up in the morning and I would think about her and just say, my prayer was 3 words, oh God, Jessica. And so for 3 weeks, she was silent. And on on March 8th, 2011, I was in Daytona doing concerts at Bike Week with the band. And we just finished, and I get an email from Jessica, and her email says, I dealt with my emotions concerning you a long time ago, and I put them all in a little box in my heart and wrapped them up with a big ribbon, and knew that you would never be there to watch me dance, to see me graduate, or to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. And now that you're here, it's hard. It's not unwanted or unwelcome. And then she concluded her message by saying, the little girl in me wants to run to you with my arms open. But the woman in me wants to know where you've been and why now. She said, and then she closed her email by saying, thanks for showing up. And when I read those words, I knew, to me, that was God speaking to me when she said, thanks for showing up. Because when Sherry and I describe what we do, that's the phrase that we use. We tell people when they say, well, tell me what you do. And I'll say, we have the ministry of showing up. And so I took the next 5 hours to draft an email to her. It's the most difficult email I've ever written. And I took full responsibility for my actions. I asked her to forgive me. I answered all the questions that I knew that I could. And when I got ready to conclude my email, I referenced this little girl that she had mentioned was ready to run into my arms. And I just simply said, Jessica, I hope the little girl wins. And so from that, we started a flurry of activity via text and emails, no conversations, no phone calls. And through that week of March 8th, and about Thursday of that week, I just said, she lives outside of Washington, D.C. And I told her, we're on the East Coast. And if you would like to meet us, just say the word and tell me when and where, and we'll be there. And so as the week progressed and as we communicated, she said, okay, Monday, the 14th, Leroy, her husband's working in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is a couple hours south of their home. She said, we'll meet you there for dinner on that evening. And so we pulled into the parking lot, and I'd never heard her voice. I'd never seen her face. And we pull into the parking lot, and there her and Leroy are standing by one of the largest pickup trucks I've ever seen in my life. And I have to tell you a little bit about Leroy. His last name is Strong. First Sergeant, retired Marine Corps, drill instructor of the year. Leroy Strong. Full
Metal Jacket. No.
Yeah. And I know, I'm assuming he's packing, right? But so we get out of our van, and Sherry and I walk up to him, and I was determined that I was not going to speak until she spoke. And I tell people that I don't use words like hi or hello in a greeting because I'm too cool for that. I'll do something like, excuse me, I'll do something like, hey. And so we walk up and stand in front of her, and it's just like I'm looking in a mirror. And it's, just amazing. And I'm waiting for her first words, and she looks at me, and she cocks her head and goes, hey. I'm a hugger. And she throws her arms around me. And we stand there for a long time and just weep. And we go finally Sherry breaks us up, and we go into the restaurant, and we sit down. It was the loudest restaurant in Charlottesville, Virginia, I'm convinced. And I ask her, I said, I tell her, Sherry actually said, look, we don't want anything from you. We don't need anything from you. We're just glad that you've taken this opportunity to meet us and let us into your life. And I told Jessica, I said, look, I'm not demanding anything from you, but I would like to ask this one thing, and whenever you're ready, if you would grant it, that would be great. And I would like to ask you to forgive me. And she reached across the table and grabbed me by the arm and said, well, but you're here now. We can't change the past, so we're cool. And when she tells the story, she talks about waiting for us to arrive at the restaurant. And she says, you know, I wanted justice. I wanted anger. I wanted bitterness. I wanted to spew abandonment and rejection and all these things that I've been through in my life onto you. But she said, I went and looked in my heart, and God spoke to her in that moment and said, you can't have those, but you can have your dad. And so, you know, we began a relationship. We talked until the wee hours of the morning, the four of us. And the next morning we were scheduled to leave, and she was scheduled to go back to work. And Sherry, when we get up in the morning, she insists, she says, we can't leave. We have to wait. And it can't be just one and done. We have to stay. And I said, fine. So we were just waiting just a few minutes. Jessica calls and says, can we do lunch? And so we go to lunch with her and Leroy. And while we're talking, I said, well, I'd like to meet the boys sometime, because they have 4 boys between them. And Leroy, who's super security conscious, Marine, introvert, right, you know, would have a fence around everything that he owns, kind of thing. He goes, well, why don't you just follow Jessica home and meet the boys? And so my first view of my oldest biological grandson was at 15 years of age, standing on stage in church playing guitar.
Wow.
And we went back to the East Coast. I'm going to need a Kleenex or something.
I don't leave it.
Or some toilet paper, or some paper towels, or an old hanky. But we went back to her house on Easter Sunday, 2011, was our first church service together. And,
out on the East Coast, right?
Out on the East Coast. And as we were getting ready for church, I was drinking coffee, and she came down and she had a gift for me. And it was a coffee mug with daddy names all over it, full of her favorite candy bar. Zero candy bars, which she had no way of knowing is my favorite candy bar. And we're talking, and she puts her hands up on my face, and she looks me in the eyes, and she says these words. She says, Daddy, it's just like you were always here. And that really describes our relationship from then till now, 10 years later. It's like there was never a void. It's not something we go back and revisit. In fact, I tried to, and my kids and her especially wouldn't let me. I tried to hang on to regret. And my son, Jason, actually confronted me with it. And he asked me a question. He said, you've got guilt and shame over this, don't you? And I said, no, I know what those destructive emotions are like, and I'm not going to hang on to those. But you just have to give me regret. And they attacked me like a pack of coyotes, you know. And Jessica finally says, listen, I'm not going to live my life that way. And I don't expect you to live your life that way either.
Wow. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we don't usually need Kleenex on these podcast interviews.
Oh, well.
My goodness.
So that's that story. So we written a book together.
Yes, and I wanted people to. It's an awesome book. I literally finished reading it this morning. I was crying this morning.
Yeah.
The Little Girl Wins.
the book includes a little history on me, her story.
Yeah.
And then when you get to chapter 10, I had trouble writing. And I've written several books, so it's not like this is the first thing I've ever done. And as I get all my good inspiration in the shower. And so I just felt like I would start with the email from her mother and put that in there as the beginning of chapter 10. And then I discovered I was still having problems writing, so I went ahead and just put all of the communications that her and I had, that I'd had with my kids, that Sherry had, all of the communications that we had up to that point where we first met.
Right.
So the words that we used to reconcile with each other are all in there.
Yeah, these emails are, literally from that March 8, March 9, March 10, March 11, all the way up to you meeting her.
Right.
And, it's very moving. So
it's definitely, it's raw.
Yeah.
And it's all out there.
Right.
It's all the honest mistakes and the ugliness of our dysfunction, my dysfunction as a parent.
One of the beautiful things, and, you kind of wrap it up there at the end of the book about forgiveness and, life's too short to carry resentments kind of thing. And I think one of the beautiful things about this is the way that, Sherry, your wife, Jason, and Amanda, your son and daughter,
right,
all received Jessica, received,
right,
their sister,
right.
They received her kids, so their nephews and nieces. The way Leroy received you and Sherry was beautiful. I just thought, gosh, it was it's such a beautiful way that each person in the story responded, not just you and Jessica, but all of your extended family around them, and even like your brother and sister, or your sister? Yeah, your sisters were started texting her or emailing her or whatever away.
One of the discoveries that we made was that Jessica had this friend growing up, and she had been to her house and spent the night when they were kids, and in their teen years, this friend comes to Jessica and says, "What would you do if you ever met your dad?" And Jessica's response was, "I'd punch him in the mouth." Well, Memorial Weekend 2011, the whole family came to our house, and then we took her and everybody to meet my sister Linda, who's since passed away, and Linda's daughter, my niece Nikki, was that girl. Jessica had been to my sister's house as an adolescent and spent the night.
Wow.
And one of the things that happened with Sherry, Sherry said her first response, Jessica wanted to know in her first email was, "Does your wife know about me? Do your kids know about me?" And Sherry's response to that was, "You tell her that my heart in our home is open to her." And while we were on the trip to meet her for the first time, Sherry said something. She looked at me and she said, "Jimmie, we have a great life. We have a great marriage. We have a great family. But something has always been missing. And Jessica and Leroy and the boys are it." And my daughter Amanda, who is my assistant, we we didn't want to tell the kids until we were face to face, but because she had access to my email, we decided that we would call. And Amanda says this. She says, you know, we have a great family, but something's always been missing. This is it. And we had tried, Sherry and I had tried to raise our children in such a way that their responsibility as a family was never just about us. It was about us and others. And so their hearts were very much prepared for this moment by what we had modeled for them their whole life. And but it is a miracle to see that everybody was 100%.
Right.
And
it's beautiful.
And nobody had any reservations about, you know, I mean, you think about the changes. So my firstborn's not my firstborn. Jason's not my firstborn. He's the middle child. Yeah. And he quickly adopted that syndrome, you know, middle child syndrome. And, you know, my niece, Nikki, my dad always called her number one. Mm-hmm. And she was no longer in that status anymore because she wasn't the oldest. And so the whole balance of our family was completely remodeled. My biggest fear in this was, where am I going to come up with money for Christmas presents? You know, 4 kids added to the family. But it's been a beautiful journey to watch as, and we purposely, I put off writing the book because I wanted it not to be a ministry deal. It was more important for me that we establish ourselves as a family rather than just have another story to tell that we can go out and share in public and make a church service out of it.
Right.
I mean, I think that that's important. And, you know, as we've told the story, it's amazing to me how many people have similar stories. They'll come to us and say, well, I'm Sherry, or I'm Jessica, or I'm Jessica's mother, or, you know, we were in West Virginia one of the first time we were ever together for Father's Day, and we told a story in a church in Martinsburg. And the first guy to come out to the table after the service was this hardened West Virginia farmer, you know, early 70s, dressed in overalls, calloused hands, you know, the whole thing. And he's literally shaking. And he comes up to me and he says, you know, I haven't talked to my kids in 25 years. And it's my fault. And I'm going to try to reconcile that. The next person that comes out is a 21-year-old, or he was going to be 21 the next day. And he comes up to me and he says, I text my mom in the service and told her what I wanted for my birthday. And I said, really, what's that? He goes, I want to meet my dad. I've never met him. And so we hear story after story after story of people that have this same disconnect. And our reason for really telling the story is to encourage those people to do something. What? We don't know. You know, for sure, pray and ask God if there's something that you need to do. Or, you know, maybe you need to actually make a call or ask for forgiveness or do the research or do whatever. And it's been amazing. You know, the last book in the Old Testament, in the book of Malachi, in the last chapter, right at the end of the chapter, says that a sign of the end times would be that the hearts of the fathers would be towards their sons, children, and the hearts of the sons would be towards their fathers. And in our little microcosm of our world, that's what this is all about.
Yeah. Man, thank you for sharing. That's so beautiful.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't know if you can shift into music mode. I'd love to have you do a song. There was a song in the book that you had written.
Right.
Was it called New Day or something?
It's a New Day.
It's a New Day. Is that one Can
possible?
Can you
maybe? I'd have to maybe run through it once.
Just curious, because you sent that to Jessica. Is that right?
I did, yeah. I wrote that song prior to knowing that any of this was going on.
Okay. And
I thought it was very unusual because, and in fact, I almost didn't record it because it was so odd to me. Because it, you know, as a preacher, you know, we're talking about forgiveness, but this song was not about, it was only about the hope of being forgiven, but it wasn't about forgiveness.
Interesting.
And when this event started to unfold, I knew that was the Holy Spirit preparing my heart to be able to say yes to this, and to accept the fact that I needed to be forgiven.
All right. That's good. All right. Well, let's shift to the music.
Okay.
All right. Well, Jimmie, thank you for being with us on the podcast and sharing your story. So beautiful. And man, that's the first podcast I've done where I needed Kleenex. So crazy. Good. Well, thanks for, you're going to close us out with a song.
Yeah.
Oh, How I Love Jesus.
Yeah, this is an old hymn of the church. So.
Jimmie Bratcher version. Yeah.
There is a name I love to hear, I love to sing its worth. Sounds like music to my ears, the sweetest name on earth. Tells me of a Savior's love who died to set me free. It tells me of his cleansing blood, the sinner's perfect plea. Bids my trembling heart rejoice. It dries each rising tear. It tells me in a still small voice to trust and never fear. Jesus, the name I love so well, the name I love to hear. No saint on earth its worth could tell, no heart conceive how dear. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because he first loved me. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because he first loved me. Because he first loved me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks for joining in at Spirituality Adventures. This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.